if you put all 2,000 of our churches in the PCA on a continuum, somebody's going to be the far left and somebody's going to be the far right. I'm probably closer to the far right than the middle or the left for sure, but somebody's on the left, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if I heard somebody articulating side B Christianity ideology.
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me so heavy, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. Calvinistically speaking, so I mix a manly drink, Pepsi and shoe polish, and I hit the YouTube link. Don't say hit, that sounds violent. And I feel my troubles all melt away. It's your Calvinist podcast with Keith Foskey. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's your Calvinist podcast with Keith Foskey. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
And welcome back to Your Calvinist Podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I am your Calvinist. And you can tell by the way that I'm dressed, we are having another one of our patent-pending bow tie dialogues. Can you believe it? It's almost back to back. I just did my bow tie dialogue with Dr. Daniel Hyde from the United Reformed Church of North America. And today I've got two wonderful friends from the Presbyterian Church of America, the PCA, are going to be here today. And we're going to ask this question: is the PCA gone woke? That's a question we're going to be diving into, and it's two brothers that I really love. But before we get to them, let me just remind you what a bow tie dialogue is all about. I started these over a year ago, and this is my opportunity as a Baptist to interact with brothers from other denominations, finding out about what they believe, what they teach, and sometimes what's going on in the sort of the behind the scenes stuff in these denominations. It's just a learning time for me, and hopefully an opportunity for you guys to learn more about the broader Christian world and to learn about why people believe the things that they believe. So this is a lot of fun. Why the bow tie? Because one, it's nice to look nice, but it's also an homage to my denominational videos where I dress up as a Presbyterian and I wear the bow tie. From the very first denominational video, the Presbyterian has always had the bow tie. And so this is just a quick callback to that. So if you've never seen any of my denominational videos, go check those out as well, because I try to make friendly pokes at different denominations, but we still want to be honest, and we want to learn, and we want to be gracious to our brothers in Christ. And that's what we're doing with these bow tie dialogues, is trying to learn more about one another so that we can appreciate the broader body of Christ. So today I have two pastors with me, but also let me say this, not only two pastors, but two friends, two podcasters. I have with me today Cory from the Civically Minded podcast, and I have Matthew Everhard from the greatest podcast in the history of the world, except for mine, because he sent me and you can barely see it, but it's right over my shoulder. Mm-hmm. It is a belt, because he and I were in the final two last year of the podcast championships on X, and he told me if I won that he would send me a championship belt. And true to his word, he is an uber mensch. He sent me that and I use that word because I know he likes that word. The word he always tells me I'm a mensch, and it always makes me feel nice. So Cory, Matthew, thank you both for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, glad to be here, and sorry I'm obviously underdressed for the occasion. Cory, you look fantastic. We were noting just off the air a moment ago that your three-piece suit looks amazing. Keith, you look great as well. And here I am with my thrift store polo shirt and t-shirt on underneath, looking like a slouch. Sorry about that, guys.
No, let me say this. I'm going to give you, to your credit, you have the greatest hair among us. And
do I?
I would say you're all of us have beards, but I would say yours is the most John
gray.
Calvin-like.
It's the most gray. You can say it.
so I think we're all bringing it in our own way. So.
John Calvin-like is the best way to say your beard is gray. That was very nice of you.
Well, I did. I love that picture you posted of yourself. You were a little boy. I saw that you posted, I guess on was it Facebook or something that you posted?
Yes, from my skateboarding days when I was a seventh grader. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. He had big hair, but of
Oh
course
yeah.
no beard.
Yes.
And I just said, that is absolutely you. And if you put a beard on you when you were in the seventh grade, you look the same as you do today.
Hilarious. Well, thanks for having us on. It's going to be a great discussion today. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys and looking forward to it. And I'm going to start with you, Cory, just asking you to share with the audience sort of how you became who you are today in your Christian walk, because not everybody is in the denomination they began in. And so my question to you is, did you begin as a Presbyterian, or is this something that you came to, and how did God bring you to this?
It's a great question. No, I was born and raised in a Christian home in the GARBC, which is the General Association of Regular Baptists. It's one of the, I think it's the denomination that the missions organization, the ABWE, sprang out of. Still exists. It's not a very big denomination any longer because the SBC has kind of swallowed up a lot of the smaller Baptist denominations, and I don't say that as a good or a bad thing. It's just a true thing. Then we moved to the South. I'm originally from Indiana. We moved to the South when I was about 12, and there weren't any GARBC churches, so we joined a Southern Baptist church. It's where my mother still is. It's where my younger brother is still a deacon, and my older brother was ordained as an SBC pastor about 30 years ago in that same church. My dad is buried there now. So that is how I grew up, and it's where my family still resides. And about 10 years ago, give or take, we were visiting a number of churches, my wife and I. She had just given birth to our first child, and I'm a big bluegrass fan. So a neighbor friend of mine said, hey, there's this church near you guys that has live bluegrass on the first Saturday of every month. Well, the first Saturday was coming up, and so I went over to hear live music, met what became my pastor and a couple of the other men there in the church, hit it off immediately, went home that night and said to my wife, we have tried like every church in like a 3-county radius. What do we have to lose? Why don't we go try this church in the morning? And we went the next morning, and we've never left. And over the last 10 years, God has refined and shaped and changed me in a myriad of ways, not least of which was to go from being an ardent Baptist and a premillennial dispensationalist to now being a covenanter and a Presbyterian and a postmillennialist and all these other wonderful theological terms. But it's been an amazing journey. So when people are wrestling with those types of issues, I can really sympathize and say that is not easy to do. It's not easy to look at your own belief system and go, wait a second. Have I seen Scripture rightly? Have I divided the word rightly? Because the impetus is always to say, oh my goodness, were my parents wrong? Were my pastors wrong? And there's a knee-jerk reaction there, that you want to go, what does this mean? And you start to have all of these, very strange feelings. But it's worth the work and it's worth the time. I am now a ruling elder under care, which is, again, inside baseball to the PCA. I am seeking ordination and licensure as a teaching elder, and God willing, sometime late, probably next year, I will go through my ordination requirements and be a teaching elder in the PCA.
I can honestly say you're probably the only person in the world that stopped being a Baptist because of bluegrass. I don't know. That just seems really, that's a really interesting story, and great that you found your home there. That's wonderful. Brother Everhard, tell us a little bit about how you became what you are today.
Well, I have a very mixed denominational background as it comes to my own pedigree. So I was raised as a Lutheran in a liberal ELCA church. I was confirmed, baptized and then confirmed there at the ELCA church, learned my 10 Commandments, Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, and so forth. But I had a saving experience of grace, not in that church, but in a Pentecostal church, ironically enough, where I was only visiting a couple times at youth group. And as the Lord would have it, I went into later a non-denominational setting for quite some time. The college that I went to as an undergrad was a Quaker college, believe it or not, the modern day Quakers, called the Evangelical Friends. The seminary that I went to was Brethren. I served at a congregational church, and of course, logically, then I would end up as a Presbyterian minister. So for me, though, Keith, relevant to this discussion, I was originally ordained in the EPC, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, and I served there for 11 years, and then finally transferred into the PCA, where I am now. It was a good transfer, and I'm glad for it. I do love the PCA and consider myself to be an advocate for it. I think as far as the denominational landscape goes today, the PCA is one of the most solid denominations that there is. I'm not saying we're perfect or we're the best. We do have our problems. We're going to talk about some of those problems today. But 9 times out of 10, if you pull up into a PCA church parking lot on the Lord's Day, you're probably going to find a pretty solid church for the most part. And so I am proud of the PCA. I love it. And glad to talk about some of our strengths and weaknesses. In full disclosure, we'll talk about some of those. But I'm very happy to be in the PCA, and I want to be in the PCA for the rest of my life, Lord willing. We'll see what happens, but Lord willing, I would stay in the PCA. It's a good church.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a minute to remind you that this podcast is a ministry of Sovereign Grace Family Church. So if you're in the Jacksonville, Florida area, come and visit us, and you can learn more at sgfcjax.org. Also, I want to remind you of our important podcast partners, including Tiny Bibles. Tiny Bibles produces the smallest printed Bible on the market today, and it's available in the King James, the New King James, and the New American Standard Version. And if you use my name, Keith, in the coupon code, you'll get a discount. Are you a coffee drinker? Well, Squirrely Joe's Coffee has the best coffee in the world, and it's available to be shipped directly to your home. And if you'd like to check out Squirrely Joe's Coffee, go to squirrelyjoes.com/yourcalvinist, and they will send you a free bag. All you have to do is pay for the shipping. And if you want to buy more, use my name, Keith, in the coupon code, and you'll get a discount. Are you interested in getting stronger and more physically fit? Well, High Calling Fitness offers strength training and nutrition coaching from confessionally reformed strength athletes, and it's all brought to you right through your computer. So look at the description in this video to find out how to contact them to start your journey to a healthier you. And finally, I want to mention Dominion Wealth Strategists. I'm going to have a video that comes up in a little while that shows how they can serve you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, honestly, somebody may hear you say, oh, it's the best denomination, and maybe may balk at that and say, oh, well, that's just because he's in it. I think you should think you're in the best, because if you thought there was one better, you'd go to that, right?
That's exactly right. I've said that multiple times in some of my podcasts before, that if I legitimately thought there was something better, then I would almost be foolish not to go into that thing. If I thought there was an expression of Christianity that was more faithful to Scripture, for instance, then I would probably want to be a part of that thing that I thought is the most faithful. Now, I wouldn't say that the PCA is the best in the world, but I think we're pretty good to excellent as far as many things go. Obviously, we have our weaknesses, but for the most part, I do think the PCA is in a strong place.
Recently, you were on my show, Matthew, with Richard, also known as Redeemed Zoomer, and you guys debated on the history of the PCA. And so what I wanted to do before we get to the modern issues that you're facing and some of the difficulties that you just mentioned, can you guys, and I'll let both of you speak to different various aspects of this, can y'all share with the audience how the PCA came about and the involvement of men like Machen and things like that, and why that mattered when it did, and why you believe this is a right thing? Because again, the big sort of debate, and even the debate you did on the show, Matthew, was about whether or not that was even a good thing. Was it a good thing to establish a new denomination rather than seeking to reform the denomination that was, but rather creating this new denomination? Can you give us just a little bit of the history of why that happened? And again, I'll let either one of you go first and share the aspects that you think are most important.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm going to let Matthew.
I'm going to let Matthew take this one. But but to his point, behind him on the wall, if I'm not mistaken, and behind me on the wall is what we got at the 50th PCA General Assembly, which is a kind of a reprint of the letter that was sent by the men who started our denomination. So, I mean, we are both ardent PCA men. I'm actually wearing my Covenanter pin in honor of my brother Matthew today. But you did such a good job. I watched that entire podcast with you and Redeem Zoomer and Keith. So I'm going to let you take that.
Sure. So in a nutshell, here's our history. Presbyterianism in America goes back essentially to the very beginning of our nation, and even before that. Presbyterians came to what we now think of as the New World very early on, late 1600s, and by 1709, Presbyterians began to organize themselves. Later in the second portion of the 1700s, we see the first synod being pulled together, and then eventually a General Assembly, 1788, 89. And so the mainline Presbyterian denomination goes way back prior to the founding of the United States as a nation in 1776. Unfortunately, though, over many years of faithful service to the Lord and his kingdom, the mainline denomination began to subtly shift towards some modernistic thinking. Enlightenment type ideology began to come in with German higher criticism, German liberalism, and so forth from the seminaries in Europe. And by the time the 20th century came around, early 1900s, there's some pretty serious and concerning signs that things were not headed in the right direction. Now, for the most part, many churches and pastors ministered very faithfully over the years. Presbyterianism had a wonderful influence in, for instance, like the Princetonian Presbyterians like Hodge and Warfield and so forth. But by the time the 1920s came around, it was pretty obvious that the drift was really serious. And so you begin to see in the 20th century a few jumping off points where the main line is going to have some departures of conservative movements who are going to found new conservative denominations. So J. Gresham Machen in the 1920s and 30s is going to found the OPC. Later on, you're going to see some other smaller denominational offshoots. But notably, then you have two other major departures with the PCA in its formation in the 1970s, and then in the 1980s, you have the EPC, that other denomination that I was a part of. So in each one of these stages of sort of departures from the main line, there was usually some sort of critical issue that was being discussed at that time, ranging from the inspiration of Scripture, which has been a concern for at least 100 years, if not more, to the divine nature of Christ, to the validity of the historical resurrection. And then more recently, in the last 50 years or so, a lot of conversations have focused on human sexuality and gender. And so a lot of the churches that have pulled off of the main line have been as a result of the prominence of homosexuality and so forth, and the integrity of biblical marriage. And as we move into, the 2000s and so forth, increasingly the LGBTQ plus movements and transgenderism and so forth. So all of those issues have been problems for us over the years. And that's why the main line keeps having these sort of revivalistic offshoots, of which the PCA is the largest of those. So of the conservative denominations, the PCA is the largest one that there is.
How many churches are in the PCA? Cory, do you know by chance how many churches are out there?
I want to say the report this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, was somewhere around 1,300. I believe is right around the number that we're at now. About 1,300 particular churches.
So essentially, starting in the 70s, because that's what you said, Matthew, right? That it began in the 70s. So 50 years, almost 60 years now.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here, which has official stats as of the end of 2024. It does not include the report from this year, 2025, but it has congregations of just shy of 2,000. It says 1,964. I do think we're over 2,000 churches now, and the membership is over 400,000. So again, that's end of 2024. That wouldn't be the most updated numbers.
Yeah, well, that's interesting and a powerful testimony. 400,000 people is not no small group. So good, right. Good. So the you called it a revivalistic movement, or maybe I don't want to misquote you, but basically this, coming out of error, coming out of something that had gone a wrong direction. But with every group, with every denomination, there's always the potential for fresh error, if for lack of a better term. There's always a battle to fight. There's always something coming down the way or in the midst that we're going up against. And part of the reason for coming together today is sort of to talk about what the modern issues are. And from somebody from the outside, you hear things and you kind of go, well, that doesn't sound right, or that doesn't sound like what I've seen. And that's why in my opening I said, is the PCA gone woke? Because there are those who would say, well, the PCA's just they're the next ones to go down the path of the PCUSA, which of course was very progressive and liberal, and even has now in many ways is in many of the PCUSA churches, as you mentioned in your debate, Matthew, are just totally off the rails. They don't have the gospel anymore. They're not preaching Christ anymore. So the fear of those things happening in a solid denomination like the PCA, that's always there. And so and I'm gonna let you both speak to this. What are the major issues that you all see facing the PCA right now, and where do you think the battle lines are drawn? That's a big question, I know, and I know
you want to go first on this one, Cory.
Sure. And what's amazing is Matthew and I may somewhat disagree, and that's okay. I would take it back a couple of years, even say 5 or 6 years. We had a real problem with a gentleman out of the St. Louis area. He kind of birthed this thing called the Side B Christianity movement, or the Revoice movement. A lot of people have heard it referred to as that. And it was basically gay Christianity, that you can express yourself as a gay Christian, celibate, but gay. And your identity, your sexual identity, at least, would be as a homosexual. And he was a teaching elder in our denomination. And I say was because he left our denomination. And again, I will try to call balls and strikes where I see them. The one mistake I think we made there, and we made plenty, but one of the major mistakes I think we as a denomination made there is we allowed him to leave without any kind of defrocking or any kind of real discipline taking place from a denominational standpoint. I think he had done more than enough for us to institute church discipline upon him. And by not doing so, we allowed him to leave and just become another denomination's problem. Which, again, the argument could be made, well, he would have done that anyway. Perhaps. But he would have had to gone through ordination and all of that all over again. So I would say we still have some cleaning up to do of the Revoice movement and the Side B sympathizers. I'm certain that they are still out there. They got quiet after Greg Johnson's departure. I think once he left, and it was very obvious, especially because a lot of ruling elders like myself started getting more involved. So again, go back 5-6 years ago, a lot of ruling elders started taking time off of because most ruling elders don't, like, I work in the church full time. I'm on staff. Most ruling elders don't. Most ruling elders still have, normal 9-to-5 secular work. And so for them, it was, I got to take vacation. I got to go to wherever the General Assembly is. I've got to be in the room when the vote's happening. And praise God, a lot of these men did this because it was such a kind of a boondoggle that they said, I'm going to be there. And so it was some wonderful teaching elders and a lot of faithful ruling elders who started showing up to be in the room to say, I'm not going to let this happen. We're not going to go the way of the PCUSA. So that's been a very recent problem that we've dealt with, that I think we still have a little bit of work to do on. Most recently, however, and I say most recently, like this year at the General Assembly, which was, I would say, and I'm interested to hear Matthew's take on it, I would say that of the General Assemblies I've attended, this was probably one of the least contentious, actually. So to hear some of the stuff that's come out, and again, I don't want to name drop or I'm not trying to be, you know, I hold no animosity or anger or anything. I've got friends in this world actually, but especially it was a lot of guys out of Moscow and things that came out and said, you know, oh my goodness, the Timothy Brindle moment was the moment of the, 2025 PCA General Assembly, but they weren't in the room, and Matthew and I were. It wasn't. It was a big fat nothing burger. Was there some consternation in the moment? Sure. That's normal when you have that many men of various opinions in one room who are discussing any topic. But I don't think anyone will look back on the 2025 General Assembly and go, the moment was Timothy Brindle. It really wasn't. But we did form a study committee to look at the topic of Christian nationalism. I would say that's probably the biggest marker of the 2025 General Assembly. We do have another study committee that we commissioned this year on kind of tightening up our worship, and I'll let Matthew speak to that a little more. And I think there's definitely a lot to talk about with Christian nationalism stuff. It's a huge topic, but I would say that was probably the largest topic that happened at this year's General Assembly.
Matthew, you did a video on the Timothy Brindle situation, if I remember correctly, right? So so you have an entire video explaining that, but could you give us because I don't know really the behind the scenes or anything that happened. I just saw the little video snippet that came out about, I guess he came to the microphone, asked for something. Can you kind of tell people what it is that Cory was alluding to there? Because some people may not be aware.
Yeah, I can, but that's not the question I want to answer. So I'm going to set that aside for just one moment. I want to redress a couple of things that Cory said and maybe add some context to it, just a little bit of texture. The PCA has a confidence problem, and that is that the PCA is very often quite concerned about its own spiritual health. This goes back 50 years in our denomination. Anytime something happens, many of us really worry that the whole denomination is shaking and cracking upon the very foundations because something happens. With the gentleman that Cory mentioned in the side B gay Christianity thing, I think it's helpful to keep in mind here that out of a denomination of 400,000 members, 2,000 churches, and 5,000 ministers, things are going to happen. You're going to have moral indiscretions. You're going to have sin. You're going to have church disciplinary cases. Many of us wish that church disciplinary situation would have gone better and would have had been a more determinative resolution. Ultimately, the right thing happened. He left the denomination. We wish maybe we could have defrocked him, or there could have been some kind of disciplinary proceeding on the way out the door. But the right thing happened. The guy is gone. And whenever we have one incident like that, there's a tendency to think that it infects the whole of the denomination. And in some sense it does, because it becomes the moment and the essence and the issue that we're talking about. But to suggest that the PCA has widespread a gay sexuality issue is simply not true. I don't think that's really the case. It probably took us longer to figure it out and discuss it and to go through all of the church court mechanisms. There were a number of church court mechanisms that were taking place at the local Presbyterian and General Assembly level, all of which take months and years to resolve. But at the end of the day, what happened, the PCA ended up strengthening its book of order, and we dealt with the situation, though perhaps slower than we would have otherwise wanted to. And so one of the things that when we look at the PCA, whenever these issues come up, and there will always be issues in every denomination, there is no denomination that's so pure that it doesn't have these kinds of things. The question is, how do you deal with it, and is the right resolution attained? And in this case, though the processes were much slower than we wanted, the right resolution came about, and the PCA, I think, is stronger for having dealt with it in that way. Now, to the Timothy Brindle moment. Timothy Brindle is a pastor in the PCA. He's a teaching elder at a church in Philadelphia. He's also a Reformed rapper, and his music is very good. So he's a person that's fairly well known in our denomination, both for his pastoral ministry. He also teaches at Westminster, Philadelphia. So he's an excellent guy and a good friend.
So you're saying there's a Christian rapper who teaches at the seminary?
Yes.
That's news to me and awesome. Okay.
Oh, Timothy Brindle, he's a stud. His music I think is great if you like rap. It's very urban, but it's very cool. So he comes to the microphone and he's going to address a really relevant moment wherein one of our primary directors of a major ministry, MNA, Mission to North America, who had done some questionable things this past year and related to race and white, black, and Asian issues and so forth. And Timothy Brindle, who has spoken out on matters of race before, came to the microphone to address this director of M&A, Mission to North America, because the question came up as to whether or not he should essentially be renewed as the leader of that ministry. You don't just get it forever. You have to be renewed from time to time. And Timothy Brindle was going to speak against his renewal and so forth. But unfortunately, he was basically brake checked by our moderator, Kevin DeYoung, another very, very well-known person in the PCA. And there was some various shoutings in the room, calling points of order and so forth in that moment. It was a very intense moment. And then unfortunately, Timothy Brindle's time ran out and he wasn't able to fully articulate the thoughts that he had about this particular director of M&A. So I had him on my podcast. We did a whole hour and I gave him the opportunity to say everything he wanted to say. And I thought that Timothy Brindle was awesome in that hour in which we talked about it. And he vocalized many of the opinions that I hold about race and racism and so forth, especially within our beloved denomination, the PCA.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful and clarifies a lot. The stepping back to the issue of the revoice and Cory, you called it side B. What does side B mean? What is that? What is that? What's the idea of that term? Because side B, I think about like a cassette tape that had like a side A and a side B. Is that the visual that we're painting? And what does it mean?
I didn't come up with the term, so I can only assume that and since all three of us are old enough to know what you're talking about, if you take that type of language, kind of a cassette tape, usually side A was the big hit, it was the radio release, right? And then side B was kind of a deep track. It usually wasn't out on the radio. It was less known. So I think that's probably very close, if not exactly the language they were going for. So if side A is normative, that for the average Christian, you're heterosexual, right? And you identify yourself as heterosexual. Then side B would be, the deep track, the rarity that you're Christian, but you identify as homosexual. Good friend of I think all three of ours at this point is Rosaria Butterfield, and she would be the first one to say no. There is no identification with any sin, in fairness, not just with homosexual sin. Christians do not get to identify as any kind of particular sin. We are in Christ. I mean, Paul says this in Corinthians and in a number of other places where, such were some of you. You were all of these things prior to coming to Christ, but once you come to Christ, you are washed, you are cleansed. You are now identifying only in and through Christ Jesus. And so the concept of side B theology is wrong-headed from the start. And I think it's just crazy. And again, so that your audience doesn't get the wrong impression, Matthew and I were in no disagreement on this particular topic. What he was describing as kind of the slowness of our court system, that's a feature. That's not actually something that we're ashamed of. That's a feature of Presbyterianism. On my channel, I do a lot of politics, and I would say the same thing of American politics. American politics grinds slowly, but that's featuristic. It's intentional, so that nothing can happen overnight, so that nothing can happen too quickly. So I think he's absolutely right there that was slow, but we're slow by design, so that nothing, gets past us in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are there within PCA, are there varying views on among the clergy, among the teaching elders and ruling elders on the issue of homosexuality and whether or not a person can be? Is that still there, or is there pretty much an agreement? And this guy was very much an outlier this person who has left. And you mentioned his name. I don't know this person, but he was saying, I'm gay, but I don't act on it. Essentially, I have a homosexual desire in my heart, but I'm celibate. And I've heard that argument. I've heard many people say that, you can be gay as long as you're not practicing in a physical act of homosexuality, and God doesn't condemn what you think in your heart. He only condemns what you do with your body, kind of, and I'm oversimplifying, of course, but that's sort of the basic. Is there still a trend or a movement within the PCA toward that, or has that pretty well been put away now? What would you think of that? Either one of you.
I think that if you put all 2,000 of our churches in the PCA on a continuum, somebody's going to be the far left and somebody's going to be the far right. I'm probably closer to the far right than the middle or the left for sure, but somebody's on the left, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if I heard somebody articulating side B Christianity ideology. The issue there isn't really about homosexual practice, which almost everybody would say is wrong. Even the person that we're talking about who left the denomination would say that acting on it was wrong. The question really had to do with inclination in the hearts. And that's where we had to wrangle with it a little bit and ask about inclination. And the conclusion of the PCA is that the inclination to sin is also sin. And so that's why we ended up strengthening our book of order in a couple subsections, especially related to questions about the ordained ministry and so forth. So there's probably still some vestiges of side B Christianity, but I don't think it's the mainstream. And that's why I think that the PCA is very, very solid for the most part. When you start talking about two actual pastors in actual churches, most of the people are going to be very, very solid on issues related to gender and sexuality. Though, again, there's probably some outliers out there that feel more inclined to, the side B stuff. One of the things that really bothered me about side B Christianity was that there was this trying to have your cake and eat it too sort of thing, where it's like, okay, well, we have to say that homosexual sin is bad because the Bible is very clear on that. There's almost no wiggle room at all. But we also want to try to eat the cake too, in the sense that we want to welcome gay people into the churches. And then they started talking about LGBTQ plus people have special giftedness and a special voice that they bring to the church. And there's things that other Christians need to learn from them and so forth. And a lot of us looked at that and said, no, actually, we don't think that we have a lot to learn from a wicked and sinful disposition. And we really don't think that that's a special giftedness that the church needs to receive. But rather, we need to welcome all LGBTQ plus people to do exactly what every other Christian does, which is to repent of their sins and to leave sinful lifestyles behind. So again, Cory, I'd be interested in your take on this, but whenever I talk to real people on the ground at Presbyterian meetings or meeting with other PCA pastors, we are in very large agreement on the historical positions related to gender and sexuality. And I think those who we would say have deviant positions are probably pretty few and far between. However, whenever it does surface, and again, we have almost 500,000 members, so somebody's going to voice a bad opinion. I think the blogosphere and the podcast sphere really jumps on those anomalous persons and voices and kind of talks about it as though the problem is just everywhere. But I actually don't think the problem is everywhere. I think it's in very remote corners of the PCA. What's your take on that, Cory?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, and just to kind of put a really fine point for the viewers, the theological term that we would all be familiar with is concupiscence. Mm-hmm. So the concupiscence of the heart, and to anchor that to Scripture, you're talking the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, but I say unto you. So that Christ Himself obviously says that intentions, motives, thoughts are sin. I mean, you cannot wiggle out of that. It's clear as day in the Sermon on the Mount. And to your point, Matthew, about what, again, most churchmen, theologians would call standpoint epistemology, where there's a standpoint of the homosexual or of some tribal person, or fill in the blank. It could be any number of people that are outside of the hegemony. And so they have this unique perspective, this unique view of the gospel and of how we do ecclesiology in the church. And so we need their unique voice to really make the church, something. The church isn't whole, not without them, So the standpoint epistemology of we need gay people to bring that flavor and flair. Well, that's just bad theology. It's bad hermeneutics. It's not helpful in any way. Matthew, you're absolutely right. We offer them the same thing we offer any sinner, a tax evader, an adulterer, a homosexual, or any other stripe. Repent and believe the gospel and be made right with God. That's all that the minister of Christ has to offer anyone is salvation in and through Christ. But
wait a minute. So you're saying it's a sin to evade taxes? I may need to go make a phone call.
Most taxes. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm kidding.
I've done an entire show with Dusty Devers on how there's a lot of taxation that is horrific and not biblical, but I still pay them, sadly. However, it's to your point, I would agree. There might be musty corners somewhere. Of course there are, because to your point, a denomination of almost 500,000 people inevitably has people that would espouse errant doctrine. I'm sure espouse some errant doctrine. If the Lord were standing in front of me, he would
both of you baptized babies. So I'm just,
That's right.
Oh, I
zing.
Yeah.
Every bow tie dialogue has to have a baptismal rebuke at some point, right?
That's right. Agreeing to come on here, I knew that there would be one or two of those. That's okay.
Yeah.
You're a friend.
We put up with it.
But no, I don't think we have I don't think we have a problem with side B Christianity. I don't think do we have some men that probably need to be rooted out? Probably, but we would have men that need to be rooted out from other corners of errant theology as well. So no, I don't think this is a patternistic problem in the PCA. I think it is something that God in his providence allowed to happen so that, to Matthew's earlier point, we could sharpen kind of the way that we do things. The BCO, or the Book of Church Order, was cleaned up and in very helpful ways, actually. So would I ever say I would have prescribed it? No, but I would say that in the same way that I didn't want Joe Biden to win and be president for 4 years. But when I look back on it, I think it was helpful in so much that it woke up a lot of people to something that was going on in America, that had he not been president for 4 years, we wouldn't have the public mandate to clean things up that we've had now. So I mean, sometimes sin can be extremely helpful to let us be exposed to something that's going on so that we can go, ooh, I didn't realize things had gotten there.
I want to key in on something. Both of you have mentioned the change in the Book of Church Order, and that as a Baptist, our particular church doesn't have a BCO. We don't have a Book of Church Order. So, Matthew, if you could just for a minute give, for people who don't know what it is, what is the Book of Church Order? What does it take to change it, and what changes did get made in this previous General Assembly?
Okay. So the Book of Church Order is a tool that we use as Presbyterians to help regulate our ecclesiology and our polity, how it is that churches function. So, of course, in our system, you can think of it as 3 layers. There's the local church, and especially the session of elders that lead it. There's the regional set of churches, which is the presbytery, that meet together regularly for fellowship and certain other functions. And then you have the national body, which is the General Assembly. In each of those 3 layers, there's ways that we're expected to act and to cooperate. And those things are all spelled out for us in what we call the Book of Church Order. The Book of Church Order has basically 3 parts. In one part, it says how churches are to function, to order themselves, such as the roles of pastors, elders, and deacons. It has another section that talks about worship. which we can set that one aside for just a moment. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, but that basically helps us to know what worship ought to look like, generally speaking. And then there's another larger portion about discipline, how to discipline a person when they sin or they teach false doctrine. And so we want those practices to all be consistent up and down the board, whether you're talking about local, regional, or denominational level. So that's called our Book of Church Order. It's something Presbyterians have done for a very, very long time, goes all the way back to the Westminster Assembly, and throughout all of the American Presbyterian iterations, all Presbyterian churches have something of a Book of Church Order. Well, in this particular case, let me answer the question of how to change it. It's not easy to change the Book of Church Order. First, a motion would have to come to the General Assembly that we call an overture with a very specific change and why that change could or should take place. That change would have to go through our overtures committee, which would approve that as a good idea. Then it would go to the floor of a General Assembly meeting where it would be voted upon. Then it goes back down to all the presbyteries for approval, yay or nay, and then it comes back the next year to the next General Assembly, at which point that change can finally be approved. Well, in this case, we had to make a couple of adjustments, really just to strengthen the language related to ordained ministers about sins of inclination. And so we did a couple of things there that I thought were helpful. I can't exactly remember the subsections and headings under which we changed. It's been a few years now. But basically, one of the things that we did is we strengthened even ways that we examine a candidate for those kinds of dispositional sins, to ask questions about that and to make sure that we were not going to ordain somebody who's basically excusing dispositional sins. So that's basically what we did. In the specifics there, we could get into chapter and verse on the Book of Order, but that's basically what happened. And we do change the Book of Order somewhat regularly. Almost every year, there's overtures to make minor tweaks to the Book of Order. Sometimes it's just a word or two where a sentence or a paragraph needs to be moved, or sometimes it's just something to find consistency with other places in the Book of Order. So this is pretty regular routine for us.
I think his name is Zachary. Is it Zachary Goff, who's one of your fellow PCA pastors? He wrote a song which is a parody of God Bless the USA called God Bless the PCA. So the last time I did the PCA Bowtie Dialogue, I had him. I had several other gentlemen. A friend of mine, David Bradshaw, was on. But we played that song, and he said, what the BCO does for me or something. It's in the song. He mentions the BCO, and that's the Book of Church Order, which is I just, every time I think about it, I think about his song. So go check out God Bless the PCA by
Zachary Groff. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So
hi, my name's Justin Johnson.
And I'm Josiah Stowe.
And we are Dominion Wealth Strategists. We are created to put money in the hands of those that are sitting in the pews.
From budgeting to estate planning, savings accounts, retirement planning, life insurance, and a heck of a lot more here at Dominion.
That means that you are leaving an inheritance that passes multiple generations, because that is the legacy. It's part of our mission.
All of Christ for all of life.
And all of finance for Christendom.
Well, looking into the future, I mean, both of you guys obviously are strong supporters of the PCA. You feel like this is where you should be. This is where God has you, and this is a great denomination. This is by your own admission earlier in the show, and how you feel. What do you think is next? What? Looking at the landscape, and obviously, Cory, you see politics because that's you're civically minded. That you're concerned with politics on your show. And I would ask this question: as neither one of you are a prophet, neither the son of a prophet, but you both have, I'm sure, looking into the near and maybe even a little longer out future for the PCA. What are the things that you see the denomination facing next? What are the battles you see that are going to be coming? Because one of the thought that I would have from an outsider, and you can tell me if you think I'm on the right track or on the wrong track. As an outsider, I would say I think we're all going to be dealing more and more with the issues of things like Christian nationalism, things like the issues of where do we stand politically, two kingdom theology versus some sort of postmillennial, view, and do you see those things as being potential dividers? What are your thoughts about the future? And Cory, I'll let you go first on that one.
A huge topic. So what do I see currently and heading into the future? As I said earlier, we started what we call a study committee. We formed a study committee at General Assembly this year to look into Christian nationalism. And I say look into Christian nationalism because, again, if you asked 10 guys who even would espouse that name, you'd get 10 different answers as to what is Christian nationalism. What does it look like? What are the unique flavors of it? I would say even the men that kind of coined the terminology, who I think, and again, I'm not calling names out as if these are bad guys necessarily, but the two guys that have kind of chapter and verse on this most recently would be Stephen Wolfe, who wrote the book The Case for Christian Nationalism, and probably Doug Wilson, who wrote a book called Mere Christendom. Those are kind of the two, most notable works on it in recent time.
And neither of those gentlemen are PCA.
No.
Oh, yeah.
No, Stephen was in attendance this year. He was there. I saw him at a couple of events. So he is, and they're both Presbyterian, in fairness. But I don't think either of them are in our denomination, particularly. But so we've now said that we would study this issue. Our moderator this year, which was Dr. Kevin DeYoung, he got to nominate 7 men, and then I think they're not alternates, they're more like advisors on the committee as well to really look into this, and then they're going to report back to us. My gut, and again, as you said, I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, is that this is such a big topic. I tend to believe that their report next year at the General Assembly will be, we need more time. I would almost be a little bit disappointed if they come back to us in June of next year and say, yep, we got it all done in about 10 months, because it took about a month or so for him to even, elect the guys. So we'd be looking at a 10 or 11 month process for them to study something as significant as Christian nationalism. So my gut says they're probably going to need another year to really look into this with any kind of significance and depth. The 7 men that were nominated, I would say kind of represent the PCA by and large, as far as from guys that think one way about Christian nationalism to guys that would think on the other side of Christian nationalism. And most of them would be somewhere in the middle. Most of the guys on the committee, I would say, are firmly in the middle. You brought up two kingdom stuff that refers to kind of an Escondido, California, what's called two kingdom theology, or sometimes radical two kingdom theology, which is a variant. And then of course postmillennialism, which is kind of this, hope of Christianity marching into victory, which oftentimes I think, and all of these positions can get very misrepresented, unfortunately. As a postmillennialist, I think the one we take a lot of misrepresentation with is that we march into victory. There's never any downside. We never, no, of course, it's not this, that's you won't look at the history of the church in any time and see a straight line. It's a lot of problems, a lot of hiccups, a lot of mistakes. You take defeats, you move forward, much like your own personal sanctification, right? So my belief would be that corporate sanctification, or Christ's kingdom growing in this earth, in this time and space, is going to reflect personal sanctification. So there's a lot of backtracking, there's a lot of moving forward. But my argument that I've said to a lot of men here in my own church and my own presbytery, guys I go to seminary with who espouse a different position than me eschatologically, which then plays itself out in other areas of theology, of course, is, do we agree that Christ actually makes a difference in the lives of men, women, boys, and girls? And of course, every Christian has to say, well, yes, because if you don't believe that, what are you even doing? You're not a Christian. So if you believe that Christ actually makes a difference in the lives of men, women, boys, and girls in real space-time, meaning that I'm a better father, a better husband, a better citizen of America, a better employee of my boss, all the way down the line, right? I'm a better version of what a human being is supposed to be, because Christ is making me such. If you believe that in the microcosm, which is individually, that's true of me, it's true of you, Keith, it's true of you, Matthew, then what does that look like en masse? What does that look like when there's 400,000 people in the PCA that are all becoming better versions of what a human being is supposed to be because of progressive sanctification? What does that look like when you add the Baptists in, and you add the Episcopalians in, and the Methodists in, and the Charismatics in, and yes, even some of the Catholics in? That what does that look like? Well, that looks like the kingdom of Christ on earth growing. And if those people have various functions, whether they're mothers, fathers, bricklayers, welders, politicians, then does that Christendom start to flesh itself out in some very real ways? And as a guy who is post-millennial, and many of my own detractors would probably say is a Christian nationalist, and again, whether that's the terminology I would choose for myself or not, inconsequential, by today's standards, I probably would be. I mean, again, if we're using the terminology and most of the things that define it, and if anyone's watched my channel, they'd go, yeah, this guy definitely is one. Again, fine. Then yes, I do think it means something. So where do I think the fight lies in the future? And I'll let Matthew kind of close us out. I think, and I don't want to go so far as to say I'm disturbed by this, because it can be a very good thing. I think the fractures that I see, or that I saw at General Assembly this year, let me put it that way. I went to 2 after-hour events that happened the same night, and it was very eye-opening to me. I went to an event hosted by what's called the GRN, and they're a very conservative wing of our denomination. Some very big names that, again, well-known guys in our denomination are very involved in it, and they hosted dinner every year. And this year I went to that banquet again, and it was excellent. I enjoyed every minute of it. I enjoyed the brothers that I met there and the fellowship that we had. The speaker was great, who this year was Dr. Ligon Duncan, and it was a wonderful event. I left that event to go to the American Reformer event, which was, at a hotel nearby, and it was a very different event. Now, again, very conservative men in that room, and I enjoyed the interactions I had with those men. And it was a panel discussion there, so it was a number of guys up on the dais. Where I see the fractions or the fracturing happening in the PCA is not currently with the liberal order and the conservative order, which is kind of what it was during the Side B stuff. I see the conservative wing kind of fracturing a little bit and kind of looking at each other going, I don't know that I agree with you. And the other side going, well, I don't know that I agree with you. And that, again, I don't want to go so far as to say disturbs me, because I think the conservatives have far more in common with one another, though we would differ maybe on some I'm not going to say insignificant points. Maybe they are significant, but we have far more to shake hands on than not. But I am seeing, especially in the blogosphere, especially on X and places like that, and I hate to put too much stock in that, but a lot is said out there, right, on social media. And I see social media just erupting, and I'm not going to name names, but names that most of your viewers would know, that one guy's taking this position, another guy's taking this position, and they kind of fire back and forth at one another. So that's where I see us currently as a denomination, kind of having this little spat. I don't think it's going to tear us apart. I think at the end of the day, we will get through this as we did the other stuff that we already talked about. And I think we'll be better for it at the end of it. I hope that the men do come back in June and say, hey, give us a little more time. Let's take another year and really look deeply and clearly, because I agree with you, Keith. I think this is a topic that's not going anywhere.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you, Cory. I appreciate that. And Matthew, your thoughts?
Okay, so this one is kind of tied into another issue too. So for my part, I think that the PCA is probably one of the strongest positioned denominations to do something like a study report on Christian nationalism. The PCA undoubtedly has the manpower, the firepower, the intellectual wherewithal, the scholars, the writers, the authors, the theologians. We're very well positioned to do a study on something as complicated as this. I think we're probably as well positioned to do a study like this as any other denomination, if not more so. I do think, though, that the study committee's report is going to be fairly predictable. I have a video coming out, Keith, and maybe we could even time these up so that I do a video, and I haven't put it out yet, but I will, where I'm going to predict, and I think very accurately, exactly what's going to happen in the PCA's Christian Nationalism Study Report, because I can see where it's going. Where it's going is this. We have a history of establishmentarianism as Presbyterians. It's just absolutely undeniable. The report's going to have to acknowledge that. Going back to the 1600s and the original writing of the Westminster Confession of Faith, and especially in the Covenanters in Scotland, we have an establishmentarianism in our bloodstream that the study report is just going to have to deal with. When Presbyterianism came to America in the 1700s, we modified the Westminster Confession of Faith because the new emerging nation, America, the United States of America, does not have a king. And so we had to change a few things for the fitting of a democracy rather than a monarchy. So there's a little change there. But the problem that we're experiencing now is that some iterations of Christian nationalism, some, not all, but just some of the fringe ones, have tied into it sort of like an ethno-nationalism too. And that's where Christian nationalism gets tied to the issue of racism. Now, I mentioned earlier that the PCA has a bit of a confidence issue. Sometimes we're afraid that we're going this way or that, or we're going to get liberal or this or that. Well, the PCA has been repenting of the sin of racism for a long time. And it seems like every time something comes up, we're very quick to repent of the sin of racism. And obviously, it's a very wicked sin, especially in this nation and so forth. I have a feeling, though, that the Christian Nationalism Study Report, as it comes out, will bend over backwards to once again apologize for the sin of racism. And in as much as it takes up racism in the study report, I think it will be a dodge to actually trying to resolve some of the issues related to how Christian a nation should be. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping this doesn't end up being just another report on racism, because we've talked about this so many times. We've apologized for it so many times. We even apologized for it this summer again, 2025, which I voted for, by the way, because I think racism's wicked and stupid and dumb and wrong and all that. So I'm glad to repent of it. But I hope that the study committee on Christian nationalism doesn't just end up another report on kinism or ethno-nationalism or white nationalism. I hope we really get to the actual biblical and theological issues related to our history of establishmentarianism. I think that would be a very interesting study report. But anyways, I'll drop my video about whenever you drop this video, and then viewers can maybe hop over there and check out my official prediction. Which is going to be exactly right. I'm going to nail it. I'm going to get this exactly right, Cory. I think I see this coming already.
Well, that's great. And that'll be an awesome thing for people to be able to follow up on. And so thank you for that. And yeah, I think that I think you're 100% right. I think the problem of this issue is it does get tied into other issues that we would obviously say are wrong and sinful and bad. And yet, okay, but that shouldn't keep us from talking about this other thing, you know? And so we can't talk about this because it brings up that is such a common and unfortunate part of our, especially online discourse. Well, this person said this, he must then be associated with or believe that. And that causes a lot of problems. Well, brothers, I want to say, first of all, thank you both for the opportunity to talk to you, to hear from you, to hear about what's going on in the PCA, to hear about why you continue to believe in the strength of the PCA. And I hope nobody listened to this and thinks, well, Keith's just doing a commercial for the PCA, because, you know, I want people to come on who actually believe what they believe and support what they believe. Even if I think you guys are out to lunch, it's okay. No. And obviously I don't, but the idea is I want to bring on the best of a denomination to be able to say good things about what you believe and why you believe it. And you guys both represent your denomination well. So for the last minute, I just want to give you guys the opportunity to each talk about what it is you do on your channel and give people the directions to go there. Don't ask people to subscribe because Matthew will hit you on the head if you do, but I'm just kidding. Matthew and I have been teasing each other about that. But yes, please tell everyone about how to get in touch with you or to watch what you do on YouTube. And Cory, will let you go first.
Sure. Thank you again, Keith, for having me on. It was a pleasure to be part of this. I don't know that I'm qualified to speak for the PCA, but I certainly I will brag about it to anyone. I do agree with Matthew. I think it's one of the healthiest denominations going today. My channel is called Civically Minded. It's spelled there on the screen. Be sure to spell it right because I'm a weirdo. So it's Civics, Ecclesiology, and Family. CIVECC for ecclesiology and LY for family. So Civically Minded is my podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify. I have a YouTube channel. I'm on X and TikTok and all the stuff, which I wasn't on 3 years ago. So as 47-year-old man, I've had to learn how to do a few new tricks, and God has been gracious. And I've had great friends like the two men in this video and others who have helped me learn some new things and guided me in some ways that hopefully have been right. And a few other times, I'm sure I've done things that privately these two guys and others have went, man, what a moron. So you can find me at Civically Minded, and I would love to talk to any of you. Thanks.
Well, my channel is just my name, Matthew Everhard, and I talk about whatever I want to talk about on any given occasion, which is usually Reformed theology, Presbyterianism, church history, Jonathan Edwards, books and Bibles, and other such things. My church is Gospel Fellowship PCA. We're right here north of Pittsburgh. So if you're anywhere in the greater Pittsburgh area, especially on the north side, come check us out in real life. Love to have you in worship sometime, 8:30 and 11. I'm also adjunct professor at RPTS, the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary, the Covenanter Seminary. And we are also in the heart of Pittsburgh. So if you're looking for a good place to do an MDiv, a conservative Bible-believing Reformed seminary, RPTS is the best. rpts.edu, and make sure to like and subscribe to Keith's channel, this very one you're watching right here.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Cory. And thank you, the audience, for being with us for this last hour. You know, I do this, as I said, to introduce you to and to talk to you about other denominations, what they believe, because we do believe we share unity in the gospel. And I'm thankful for the unity that I have with my brothers. And so if you have another denomination that you would like to see me do this with a representative or representatives of, please leave that in the comments. Let me know who it is you want me to interview next, who it is you want me to take the bow tie dialogue to, and I will be happy to try to do that. And as was mentioned earlier, we do appreciate it when you subscribe to the channel. And especially if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. And if you didn't, hit the thumbs down button twice. All right, guys, thank you for watching Your Calvinist Podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I've been your Calvinist. May God bless you.
Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. So I mix a manly drink, then I hit the YouTube link, and I feel my troubles all melt away. Oh, it's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. Beards and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
Your Calvinist Podcast with Keith Foskey, striving for superior theology and denominational unity, one joke at a time.